During the toast, my daughter-in-law raised her glass to the controlling mother-in-law trying to snatch away our inheritance. The shock came when I canceled their rent check on Monday. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. But to understand how I reached this point, I need to go back a few weeks. My name is Martha Wilson. I'm 65 years old, and until 2 months ago, I believed I had built a loving, united family. Frank, my husband of 43 years, died suddenly of a heart attack. We met in college, built our life together, and raised 2 children, Michael, 38, and Rebecca, 35. Our home, a comfortable 3-bedroom Victorian residence in the Boston suburbs, was where everyone gathered for holidays, where our family memories were created and preserved. That Sunday was the first family dinner since the funeral. Rebecca had returned to Chicago with her husband after the burial, but Michael, his wife Vanessa, and their 2 children lived just 20 minutes away. They had always been constants in our lives, or at least that's what I thought. I spent the entire day cooking the roast that Frank loved as a way to honor him. I set the table with our good china, put fresh flowers in the center, and even used the candles we kept for special occasions. I wanted it to be a moment of healing, of family unity after our loss. Michael arrived first, giving me a quick hug. "Smells good, Mom," he said, but his eyes didn't meet mine, wandering around the room as if he was taking inventory. Vanessa came, in right behind him, muttering a greeting while checking her phone. The boys, Jason, 10, and Tyler, 7, ran to hug me with the sincerity that only children possess. "How are you managing, Mom?" Michael asked as I served the appetizer. "Has it been difficult taking care of such a big house alone?" Something in his tone bothered me, but I answered honestly, "I'm adapting. The house seems quieter now, but it's 40 years of memories. I can't imagine living anywhere else." Vanessa exchanged a quick glance with Michael. "Martha, you have to be practical. This house is too big for one person, and maintenance is expensive." "I can manage just fine," I replied, feeling a growing uneasiness. Frank left everything organized. I have, savings, his retirement, my own. Dinner proceeded with a tension I couldn't name. As I served dessert, Michael cleared his throat and set down his cutlery. "Mom, we've been talking. I think it's time for you to consider selling the house." My heart raced. "Sell? But why? This is our home." "It was both of your home," Vanessa corrected. "Now it's just you. And frankly, this property is a stagnant investment. Neighborhood prices are at their peak. If you sell now, you could buy a small apartment, invest the rest." "I'm not interested in selling," I replied, my voice firmer than I felt. "Besides, Frank and I always talked about leaving this house to you and Rebecca eventually." That's when I noticed the second look between them. A complicit look, almost calculating. "About that." Michael hesitated. "We talked to Dad's lawyer. Apparently, the house is in his name, not jointly. And according to the will, all assets go to the children, divided equally." The air left my lungs at once. That can't be right. Frank and I bought this house together. My name is on the deed. Vanessa sighed as if she were talking to a stubborn child. "Martha, we checked the documents. The house was refinanced 10 years ago, remember? When Frank expanded the business, at that time they put only his name on it to get better terms. That didn't make sense. I would remember something like that. We signed so many papers back then when Frank expanded his small consulting company. I trusted him to handle the details. Could it be? No, it was impossible. Anyway," Michael continued, "we thought about listing the house next month. You can stay with us until we find a good place for you." "With you?" I repeated incredulously. Their apartment had only 2 bedrooms. The boys already shared one. "And where would I stay?" "On the sofa bed in the living room, temporarily. Vanessa replied, as if it were obvious. Or we could rent something for you with the advance from the sale. My head was spinning. No, absolutely not. I will not sell my house. And I'm sure there's a mistake about the will. Frank would never leave me destitute. Don't be dramatic, Mom. Michael rolled his eyes. Nobody's leaving you destitute. We're just trying to help. You can barely climb the stairs without getting out of breath. How will you maintain this place? That was a cruel distortion. I had arthritis in my knee, yes, but I managed my condition well. I kept the house immaculate, tended the garden, paid bills on time. I had a career as a librarian for 30 years before retiring. Michael, I said with a trembling voice, this is my home as much as it was your father's. I'm not going anywhere. That's when Vanessa gestured for her husband to pour more wine. She raised her glass, a thin smile on her lips. To the controlling mother-in-law trying to snatch away our inheritance. The silence that followed was deafening. The boys looked confused. Michael seemed torn between embarrassment and silent agreement. You need to leave, I finally managed to say, rising from the table. My legs barely supported me. Later that night, alone in my bedroom, our bedroom, I cried like I hadn't since the funeral. Not just for the betrayal, but for the revelation that my own children saw me as a burden, an obstacle between them and money. The next morning, I remembered something important. Michael and Vanessa had been having financial difficulties for months. Frank and I had been helping with their rent, paying directly to the landlord. This month's check was already signed, on the desk, ready to be sent. I called the bank and canceled the payment. It was a small act of resistance, but it was the first step in regaining control. If they wanted war, they would have it. I wouldn't leave without fighting for what was rightfully mine, for what Frank and I built together. The phone rang almost immediately. It was Michael, his voice oscillating between anger and panic. Mom, what did you do? We just got a call from the landlord saying the check was canceled. How strange, I replied calmly. Looks like now you have your own housing problem to solve. The week after I canceled Michael and Vanessa's rent check was eerily quiet. No calls, no visits, not even messages asking about the grandchildren. The silence spoke volumes. I had crossed an invisible line, and now the real battle would begin. I spent those days like a detective in my own home, searching through file, cabinets, old paperwork, tax returns, anything that might shed light on what Michael had claimed about the house being solely in Frank's name. How could a home we'd purchased together 40 years ago now suddenly belong only to him? My hands trembled as I rifled through the files in Frank's study. This room had always been his domain, and I'd respected that. Now I felt like an intruder, digging through the remnants of his life, looking for evidence to protect myself from our own children. On the third day, I found our original mortgage documents from 1981. Both our names were clearly listed as co-owners. Relief washed over me, until I remembered Michael's mention of a refinancing 10 years ago. I continued searching and found those papers too. My heart sank as I saw only Frank's signature on the deed. How could I have missed this? Had I signed something without reading it? Or worse, had Frank deliberately left my name off? No, I refused to believe that. Frank wasn't perfect, but he was honest and loyal. There had to be another explanation. I called our family attorney, James Patterson, who had handled Frank's will. His secretary informed me he was on vacation for 2 weeks. Convenient timing. I insisted on speaking with whoever was covering his clients, but was told no one could discuss Frank's will without proper authorization. By Friday, reality set in. I needed professional help. I called Barbara Mitchell, an old friend who had retired from family law practice 5 years ago. She agreed to meet for coffee the next morning. Martha, this doesn't sound right, Barbara said after hearing my story. Even if the house was refinanced in only Frank's name, as his spouse, You should have rights to it, especially after a 43-year marriage. And a will doesn't supersede spousal rights in Massachusetts. Her words gave me hope. So what do I do? First, get a copy of the actual will, not just what Michael claims it says. Second, find all documentation related to the house. And third, she leaned closer, protect yourself. If they're willing to try taking your home, what else might they do? What do you mean? Bank accounts, investments, personal belongings. Make sure you have access and control, and document everything, every conversation, every strange occurrence. Keep a journal. I followed her advice, starting that very day. I went to the bank and was shocked to discover that 2 of our joint accounts now listed Michael as a co-signer instead of me. When did that happen? The last statement I'd seen still had my name. The bank manager explained that the changes had been made 3 weeks ago, just days after Frank's funeral. But I never authorized this, I protested. According to our records, Mr. Wilson made these changes before his passing. The paperwork has his signature. I requested copies of all documents and account statements for the past 6 months. Frank had always handled our finances, but this felt wrong. Had he been planning something without telling me? Or was something more sinister at work? When I returned home, Rebecca was waiting on my porch. My daughter's presence should have been comforting, but her expression told me she wasn't there to offer support. "Mom, we need to talk," she said as I unlocked the door. "Michael called me about what you did." I motioned her inside. "Would you like some tea?" "No, I don't have much time. My flight back to Chicago leaves in 3 hours." She remained standing in the entryway. "Why are you making this so difficult?" Michael and Vanessa were counting on that rent money. They were counting on money from their dead father to pay their rent while trying to kick his widow out of her home. The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Rebecca sighed. "That's not what's happening. Look, we're worried about you living alone in this big house. You're not getting any younger, Mom." "I'm 65, not 95, I replied. "I'm perfectly capable of managing on my own." "That's not the point. Dad left specific instructions." "Show me," I interrupted. "Show me these instructions." "I want to see the will." Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. "Michael has the paperwork. I haven't actually seen it myself, but he explained everything. Dad wanted the house sold and the proceeds split between us." "And what about me? Where did your father expect me to live?" She averted her eyes. "There's provision for you to have a portion of the proceeds for housing. Michael said he'd help you find a nice retirement community." The betrayal cut deeper with each word, not just from my children, but the implication that Frank, my partner for over 4 decades, would leave. Me so vulnerable. "Rebecca, I don't believe your father would do that to me. Something isn't right here." "Mom, please don't make this ugly. We can handle this as a family without lawyers and courts." The threat was thinly veiled. They expected me to go quietly, to trust their word about my husband's wishes and my future. "I want to see the will," I repeated firmly. "I'll talk to Michael," she conceded, checking her watch. "I really have to go. We'll figure this out." She gave me a quick, perfunctory hug before leaving. No invitation to visit her in Chicago. No mention of when she might return. Just another thread of family connection severed. That evening, I called both my grandchildren to say goodnight, as had been our ritual for years. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried Michael and Vanessa's home phone. No answer. Then my cell phone pinged with a text from Michael. "The boys are busy with homework. We'll call when things calm down." Things would calm down when I surrendered my home, my independence, and my dignity. That was the unspoken message. The isolation strategy was clear now. Cut me off from the grandchildren I adored. Make me desperate for family connection. Wear down my resistance until giving in seemed like the only option to end the loneliness. Throughout the next week, the pattern continued. No visits, no calls. When I tried reaching out, excuses abounded. They were busy, the boys had activities, Vanessa wasn't feeling well. Once, Michael answered and spoke briefly, his tone cold and businesslike, before claiming he had another call coming in. I started my documentation journal, as Barbara suggested, recording every interaction, every canceled plan, every refused call. The evidence of their systematic isolation campaign grew day by day. On Wednesday afternoon, while sorting through more paperwork, I discovered something odd. Among Frank's recent papers was a document dated just 5 months ago. A life insurance policy I'd never seen before. The beneficiary wasn't me. It was a trust in the children's names. Why would Frank take out a new policy without telling me? And why exclude me as beneficiary? The more I looked, the more inconsistencies I found. Bank withdrawals I couldn't account for. Investment accounts I hadn't known existed. A pattern of financial segregation that had apparently been happening for months before Frank's death. Thursday morning, my doorbell rang. It was a courier with an envelope from James Patterson's office. Inside was a brief note explaining that as a courtesy, he was sending a copy of Frank's will at my request, though he had no record of such a request. Someone had impersonated me. With shaking hands, I opened the document and began to read. The will was dated just 6 months ago, replacing one we had created together a decade earlier. As Michael had claimed, it directed that the house be sold and proceeds divided between our children. I was to receive a reasonable stipend for alternative housing, with Michael as trustee to determine what was reasonable. The signature at the bottom was Frank's, but something felt off. I compared it to other documents he had signed around the same time. The will signature was close, but not identical, slightly more angular, the loop on the F not quite right. I called Barbara. Immediately. I think Frank's will might have been forged, I said without preamble. That's a serious accusation, Martha. What makes you think so? The signature doesn't match others from the same period, and Frank would never have done this to me. Leave me at the mercy of the children for housing, cut me out of decisions about our home. Keep the original documents safe, Barbara advised. And Martha, be careful who you share your suspicions with. If someone did forge that will, they've committed a crime. They won't take accusations lightly. That night, I couldn't sleep. If the will was forged, who had done it? Michael was the obvious suspect, but he wasn't the only possibility. Frank's business partner had access to many of his papers. So did his secretary. And what about the strange changes to our finances in the months before his death? As I finally drifted off near dawn, a horrifying question formed in my mind. What if Frank's death wasn't from natural causes after all? The horrifying thought that Frank's death might not have been natural haunted me for days. I couldn't bring myself to voice these suspicions to anyone. They seemed too terrible, too extreme. Frank had a history of heart problems. His father had died of a heart attack at 62. The medical examiner had found nothing suspicious. But the timing of everything, the changed will, the altered accounts, his sudden death just when all these financial arrangements had been put in place, gnawed at me. I forced myself to put these darkest thoughts aside and focus on what I could prove. After 2 weeks of investigating, I had assembled a concerning collection of evidence. Bank statements showing unusual transfers before Frank's death, investment accounts I'd never known about, and the life insurance policy with the children, as beneficiaries instead of me. Barbara reviewed my findings over coffee at her kitchen table, away from my house where I increasingly suspected Michael might have installed monitoring devices during one of his visits. The changes in my normally rational thinking unsettled me. I was becoming paranoid, seeing threats everywhere. But Barbara's reaction to my evidence told me my concerns weren't unfounded. Martha, these financial changes are systematic, she said, adjusting her reading glasses as she studied the documents. None of them individually would raise alarms, but together? This looks like someone deliberately diverting assets away from you. But who? Frank? Barbara hesitated. I knew Frank for 30 years. He wasn't the type to secretly undermine his wife, but I can't ignore what these papers show. Could Michael have done this? Manipulated accounts without Frank's knowledge? Possibly. If he had access to Frank's passwords, signature stamps, personal information. Did Frank ever mention giving Michael more control over family finances toward the end? I thought back to the conversations in the months before Frank died. He mentioned teaching Michael more about our investments, preparing him to help when we got older, but that was about guidance, not control. We need to talk to the bank managers in person, and we need to get a handwriting expert to examine that will. Before we could implement Barbara's plan, life threw another complication my way. That afternoon, I received a call from Tyler's school. My 7-year-old grandson had fallen on the playground and needed someone to pick him up. The school had tried Michael and Vanessa but couldn't reach either of them. Of course I'll come, I said, grateful for any chance to see my grandchildren after weeks of forced separation. Tyler's face lit up when he saw me in the nurse's office. His knee was bandaged, but his spirits seemed high despite the injury. Grandma, you came! He threw his arms around me like I was a lifeline. Of course I came, sweetheart. I've missed you so much. Mom and Dad said you were too busy for us now, he said innocently. The words stabbed my heart. That's not true, Tyler. I've been trying to see you boys every day. We stopped for ice cream on the way to my house. Tyler chattered about school, his friends, and how Jason was learning to play the trumpet. All the details of his life I'd been missing. He didn't mention anything about the house situation, and I didn't bring it up. At home, I called Michael to let him know Tyler was with me. The call went to voicemail. I texted him with the same information. No response. I made Tyler his favorite mac and cheese for dinner. We were playing a board game when the doorbell rang. Michael stood there, face tight with barely controlled anger. Tyler, go wait in the car, he ordered. But Dad, I haven't finished beating Grandma at Monopoly. Now, Tyler. The boy gave me a quick hug before walking dejectedly to the car. As soon as Tyler was out of earshot, Michael turned on me. What the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just take my son. I didn't take him. The school called me when they couldn't reach you or Vanessa. He was hurt. A scraped knee isn't an emergency. You should have called me first. I did call you. I left a message. I texted you. You didn't respond. Michael glared at me. You know what this is about. You're using the kids to manipulate us. Just like you're using the rent check to blackmail us into backing off about the house. His distortion of reality left me speechless for a moment. How had my son become this person? Someone who could twist a grandmother caring for an injured grandchild into a manipulative plot. Michael, I said finally, struggling to keep my voice steady. This isn't about the house. This is about Tyler needing someone to pick him up from school. This is about the fact that I haven't been allowed to see my grandchildren for weeks because you and Vanessa are punishing me for not rolling over and giving you what you want. That's not— Let me finish, I interrupted, finding strength I didn't know I had. I've been doing some research. I've found some very interesting documents you might want to explain. Like how Frank's signatures on recent papers don't quite match his actual signature, or how accounts were changed without my knowledge right before he died. The color drained from Michael's face, replaced almost immediately by a flush of anger. Are you accusing me of something? I'm asking for explanations. I deserve that much. Michael's hand clenched into a fist by his side. You want explanations? Fine. Dad knew you couldn't handle things after he was gone. He knew you'd make emotional decisions instead of practical ones. He put me in charge because someone needed to think clearly about family assets. By thinking clearly, you mean selling my home out from under me and pocketing the money? It's not your home. It's a family asset that needs to be managed properly. Car door slammed, Tyler getting impatient. Michael glanced over his shoulder, then back at me, lowering his voice. Listen carefully, Mother. You can make this easy or difficult. Easy means you cooperate, we sell the house, you get a nice little condo and a monthly allowance. Difficult means we fight this in court, where I'll have to raise questions about your mental competence and ability to manage your own affairs. Think about how that will look to your friends, your book club, your church group. The threat was unmistakable. He would publicly humiliate me, paint me as senile or unstable, rather than let me keep my own home. My own son. Get out of my house, I whispered. It's not your— Get out. I hadn't raised my voice to my children since they were teenagers. The force of it seemed to physically push Michael back a step. He turned and walked to the car. Before getting in, he called back, "You'll be hearing from our lawyer, and don't expect any more visits from the boys." After they drove away, I collapsed onto the entryway bench, shaking uncontrollably. The magnitude of the betrayal was almost too much to bear. My son had threatened to declare me incompetent if I didn't surrender my home. He had used my grandchildren as pawns in his game, and worst of all, he had implied that Frank, my Frank, had been part of this plot. But in his anger, Michael had made a crucial mistake. He'd confirmed my suspicions that something wasn't right with the will and financial changes. His defensive reaction told me I was on the right track, and his threat to use the courts had revealed his own fear. He knew. His position might not be as strong as he pretended. The next morning, I woke with a new resolve. I would no longer be passive, waiting for my children to decide my fate. I called Barbara and outlined a plan. "We need to act quickly before Michael tries to have me declared incompetent," I explained. "I want to hire a handwriting expert to examine the will signature. I want to speak to Frank's doctor about his final days. And I want to talk to his secretary about who had access to his papers. Martha, this is getting serious. If what you suspect is true—" "I know," I cut in. "My son may have committed fraud or worse, but I need to know the truth no matter how painful." That afternoon, I had my locks changed and installed a security system. I moved my valuables and important papers to a new safe deposit box that only Barbara and I knew about. I withdrew cash from my personal account, secured my jewelry, and packed an emergency bag in case I needed to leave quickly. The investigator Barbara recommended was a retired FBI agent named Derek Johnson. He arrived promptly at 2 p.m. professional and reassuring in his conservative suit. "Mrs. Wilson, I understand you have concerns about some financial documents," he said after introductions. I showed him the will, the insurance policy, the bank transfers. "I believe my son may have been manipulating my husband's finances before his death and is now trying to seize control of my home." Derek examined the papers carefully. "The signature discrepancies are concerning. I'd need to have these examined by our lab for a definitive opinion. How long would that take?" "A few days. But Mrs. Wilson, if your suspicions prove correct, we're looking at potential criminal charges. Are you prepared for that?" The question hit me hard. Was I ready to potentially send my own son to jail? The Michael I raised had been kind, responsible, principled. When had that boy turned into this greedy stranger? "I need to know the truth," I replied finally. "Whatever it is." As Derek was leaving, another visitor arrived, Rebecca. My daughter looked tired, her usual polished appearance slightly rumpled. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, eyeing Derek suspiciously as he drove away. "Who was that?" "A friend of Barbara's. I wasn't ready to reveal my investigation." "Come in." "Would you like some tea?" Unlike her previous visit, Rebecca accepted and followed me to the kitchen. As I prepared the tea, she fidgeted with her phone, clearly uncomfortable. "Michael says you're becoming unstable," she finally said. "That you accused him of. I don't even know what. Forgery? Fraud? Is that why you're here? To evaluate my mental state?" Rebecca had the grace to look embarrassed. I wanted to see for myself This doesn't sound like you, Mom. And threatening to declare me incompetent doesn't sound like Michael. Yet, here we are. I set the tea down and faced my daughter directly. Rebecca, someone has been systematically moving Frank's assets away from me for months. Someone forged his signature on a new will that leaves me dependent on Michael's goodwill for housing. Do you honestly believe your father would do that to me after 43 years of marriage? Rebecca stared at me, her tea cooling untouched before her. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence between us. You really believe Michael forged Dad's signature? She finally asked, her voice small. I don't want to believe it, I replied honestly. But the evidence is troubling. Look at these. I slid the folder of documents across the table. The mismatched signatures, the account changes, the transfer records. Rebecca examined them slowly, her face growing paler with each page. This doesn't make sense. Michael has a good job. Vanessa works too. Why would they need to? She couldn't finish the sentence. They've been struggling financially for a while. Frank and I were helping with their rent. But this house? It's worth nearly $1 million in today's market. Split two, weighs $500,000 each, Rebecca whispered. But Mom, I never asked for this. I didn't know anything about changing the will or accounts. I studied my daughter's face, searching for deception. She seemed genuinely shocked. Then why did you back Michael's story about your father wanting the house sold? She looked away. Michael explained everything so convincingly. He said Dad had discussed it with him extensively before he died. That it was for your own good, that you couldn't manage the house, that it would preserve more of the estate for all of us if we sold it now. And you believed that Frank would? Leave me homeless? Dependent on Michael's charity? Not homeless. Michael said you'd have a place, a nice condo or something. Her voice trailed off as she realized how hollow it sounded. Rebecca, your father and I had a marriage built on mutual respect and partnership. We made decisions together. Do you honestly think he would have made these huge financial changes without even discussing them with me? She was quiet for a long moment. No, Dad would never have done that. Those simple words, that acknowledgement, broke something open inside me. Tears spilled down my cheeks. For weeks I'd been fighting alone, doubting myself, questioning a lifetime of memories with Frank. Having someone else, my daughter, affirm what I knew in my heart was like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Rebecca reached across the table and took my hand. Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have asked more questions. I should have come to you first, instead of taking Michael's word for everything. You're here now, I said, squeezing her hand. What do we do? She asked. If what you suspect is true, this is serious. Really serious. I've hired an investigator to examine the documents. If the signatures are forged, we'll have proof. Then I'll decide next steps. Rebecca looked troubled. Michael's my brother, but what he's doing to you, it's cruel and possibly criminal. I know, I'm his mother. This isn't easy for me either. I took a deep breath. There's something else you should know. Michael threatened to have me declared mentally incompetent if I fought him on selling the house. He what? Rebecca's shock seemed genuine. He said he'd make things difficult, raise questions about my mental state in court, use my resistance as evidence I couldn't manage my own affairs. I don't even have words. She shook her head in disbelief. Mom, I'll help however I can. I can extend my stay, postpone my return to Chicago. Thank you. Having you here means everything. That evening, as Rebecca settled into the guest room, I felt less alone than I had since Frank's death. My daughter's support was a comfort I hadn't realized how desperately I needed. The next morning brought another unexpected ally. I was sorting through more papers when the doorbell rang. Opening it, I found Jason, my 10-year-old grandson, standing on the porch with his bicycle. Jason, what are you doing here? Does your father know where you are? He shook his head. Dad and Mom are fighting. I told them I was going to Jimmy's house. His eyes were red-rimmed. Grandma, are you really crazy? Dad said you're imagining things and might need to go to a special hospital. The cruelty of Michael using his own children in this way infuriated me, but I kept my composure for Jason's sake. No, sweetheart, I'm not crazy. Your father and I disagree about some important things, but there's nothing wrong with my mind. That's what I thought, he said with the straightforward logic of children. You remember all my baseball stats better than Dad does. I smiled at his simple but perfect reasoning. Would you like some hot chocolate? Then I should call your parents to let them know you're here. They won't answer if they see it's you, Jason said matter-of-factly. Dad blocked your number on all our phones. Another revelation that shouldn't have surprised me but still hurt. Then we'll call from Aunt Rebecca's phone. She's staying with me for a while. Jason's face brightened. Aunt Becca is here? Cool. Over. Hot chocolate. Jason revealed more troubling information. Dad and Mom keep arguing about money, and the other day, Dad was yelling at someone on the phone about a deadline and backing out of the deal. He was super mad. I exchanged glances with Rebecca. What deal was Michael involved in that had him so desperate for cash? When Rebecca called Vanessa to report Jason's whereabouts, the response was immediate panic followed by anger. Keep him there. We're coming. To get him, Vanessa said curtly before hanging up. 20 minutes later, Vanessa's SUV screeched into our driveway. Michael wasn't with her. She burst through the door without knocking. Jason Andrew Wilson, get your things. We're leaving, she ordered. Mrs. Wilson, I began formally. Jason came here upset because I don't want to hear it, Vanessa snapped. You've done enough damage. Jason, now! Rebecca stepped forward. Vanessa, what's going on? Why are you treating Mom this way? Vanessa glared at her. Oh, she's got you fooled too? Great, just perfect. She grabbed Jason's arm. Let's go. Mom, Rebecca called as they headed to the door. Don't you think Jason deserves to know why his grandmother suddenly can't see him? Don't you think he deserves the truth? Vanessa froze, then turned slowly. Something in her expression had changed, fear replacing anger. You don't understand. None of you understand what's at stake. Then explain it to us, I said gently. Vanessa looked at Jason, then back at me. Not in front of him. Jason, honey, can you go help Aunt Rebecca find those cookies I baked yesterday? I suggested. Once they left the room, Vanessa's composure crumbled. Michael's in trouble. Big trouble. We're about to lose everything. What kind of trouble? I asked, not entirely surprised but concerned by the desperation in her voice. Gambling debts. Bad investments. He borrowed money from people you don't say no to. She wrung her hands anxiously. The house money was supposed to fix everything. Pay everyone off. Give us a fresh start. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Michael's increasingly erratic behavior, the urgent need for cash, the forged documents. It all made terrible sense. How bad is it? I asked. Vanessa's eyes met mine, filled with genuine fear. Bad enough that we're thinking about disappearing, taking the boys and starting over somewhere new. Vanessa's revelation about Michael's gambling debts changed everything. As she sat trembling in my kitchen, the angry daughter-in-law transformed into a frightened woman caught in a spiral of bad decisions. How long has this been going on? I asked, pushing a cup of tea toward her. The gambling? Years. But it got worse after his promotion. More money. More pressure. Vanessa stared into her cup. The debt started about 18 months ago. Small. At first, then bigger. He kept saying he could fix it with one big win. And the people he borrowed from? She shuddered. Not the kind who send late notices in the mail. They've started coming to our apartment, calling at all hours. Last week, someone approached Jason after school, told him to remind his daddy about the clock ticking. My blood ran cold. My grandchildren were being threatened because of Michael's actions. And selling my house was going to solve this? Half. $1 million would clear the immediate debts. Give us breathing room. She looked up, fear etched in her face. I'm not proud of what we've done, Martha, but I'm terrified of what happens if we don't get that money. I considered my options carefully. Part of me wanted to wash my hands of Michael's self-created problems. But there were innocent parties involved, Jason, Tyler, and even Vanessa, who might be complicit but was clearly acting from fear. Taking the boys and disappearing isn't the answer, I said firmly. That's no life for children. What choice do we have? These aren't people you can negotiate with. Rebecca returned without Jason, who was happily watching TV in the den. I heard everything, she said, joining us at the table. Michael needs to face consequences, but we need to protect the boys. Over the next hour, the three of us formulated a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it addressed both the immediate danger and the longer-term issues. Are you sure about this? Rebecca asked me when we finished. You'd be giving up a lot. Not as much as you might think, I replied. And what's the alternative? Let my grandchildren live in fear? Or worse, disappear and spend their lives looking over their shoulders? Vanessa seemed stunned by my willingness to help after everything they'd done. Why would you do this for us, after how we've treated you? I'm not doing it for you or for Michael, I said honestly. I'm doing it for Jason and Tyler, and because it's what Frank would have wanted. That afternoon, I called Derek Johnson and explained our new approach. Then I contacted my bank and began the process of liquidating certain investments, legal ones that were indisputably mine. Barbara helped expedite the paperwork, though she had reservations. You're rewarding criminal behavior, she warned. I'm protecting my grandchildren, I corrected. And don't worry, Michael isn't getting a free pass. The next step was the hardest. I had to convince Michael to accept my terms without revealing that I knew about his gambling debts. Vanessa agreed to arrange a meeting at our house the following day, with Rebecca present as a witness and mediator. Michael arrived looking haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. The confident, threatening man who had confronted me days earlier was gone, replaced by someone barely holding himself together. What's this about? He asked suspiciously, looking between Vanessa, Rebecca, and me. Some kind of intervention? No, I replied calmly. It's about finding a solution that works for everyone. You called this meeting to surrender the house? His momentary hope was painful to witness. Not exactly. I have a counter-proposal, one that addresses everyone's needs. I slid a folder across the table, not the evidence of his forgeries and fraud, but a new document drawn up by Barbara's colleague specializing in family trusts. Michael opened it, confusion spreading across his face as he read. What is this? It's a family protection trust, I explained as Michael stared at the document. The house will be placed in this trust. Neither you nor I will own it directly. I don't understand, Michael said, flipping through the pages. How does this help my situation? I kept my voice steady. The trust comes with a significant cash distribution, $200,000 immediately. I watched his eyes widen. Another $300,000 in structured payments over the next 5 years. Where is this money coming from? Michael asked suspiciously. From my personal investments, ones that Frank set up for me years ago, separate from our joint accounts. Michael looked between Vanessa and me. And what do you want in return? Several things. First, Jason and Tyler become co-beneficiaries of the trust with you and Rebecca. The house remains in the family for at least 20 years. I retain lifetime residence rights. And? He knew there had to be more. You enter a gambling addiction treatment program. You submit to financial oversight from the trustee, who will be Rebecca, not me. And you acknowledge and sign a confession regarding your forgery of your father's signature on the will and other documents. The color drained from Michael's face. Stop, Rebecca interrupted. The handwriting expert's preliminary report already confirms the forgeries. Mom has enough evidence to send you to prison, Michael. She's offering you a way out. Prison? He looked genuinely shocked, as if the criminal nature of his actions had never fully registered until that moment. Forgery, fraud, elder financial abuse, I listed calmly. But I'm not interested in seeing my son behind bars. I'm interested in healing our family and protecting my grandchildren. Michael slumped in his chair. The facade of the confident businessman, the threatening son who had tried to bully his mother out of her home, crumbled completely. The debts, he whispered. You don't understand how dangerous these people are. I understand better than you think, I replied. The trust distribution will clear those debts, but you'll never have direct control of large sums again. Rebecca will manage the trust distribution and pay creditors directly. You knew. He looked at Vanessa accusingly. You told them. She was protecting her children, I said before Vanessa could respond. Something you should have been doing instead of gambling away their security. Michael buried his face in his hands. For a moment, I glimpsed the little boy he'd once been, overwhelmed, scared, looking to his mother to fix things. But I couldn't. Fix this with a bandage and a cookie. The healing would be harder, longer. If I agree to all this, what happens to the evidence? The forgery proof? It stays with my attorney in a sealed file. If you comply with all conditions for 5 years, it will be destroyed. If not, it goes to the district attorney. Rebecca slid a pen across the table. It's more than you deserve, Michael. His hand trembled as he signed the documents. With each signature, I felt a weight lifting. Not everything was resolved. There would be difficult conversations ahead, trust to rebuild, relationships to repair. But the immediate danger to my home and to my grandchildren had passed. 1 month later, we gathered for another family dinner. Michael was 3 weeks into his treatment program, looking healthier than he had in months. Vanessa and the boys had moved into a smaller apartment that they could actually afford. Rebecca had extended her stay in Boston indefinitely, taking a remote position with her Chicago firm to remain close and manage the trust. As I set the roast on the table, the same recipe I'd made the night this all began, I realized how much had changed. My house was still my home, but now it was also formally protected as a legacy for future generations. My relationship with my children was damaged but healing, and I had discovered strength in myself that I never knew existed. Before we eat, I said, raising my glass, I want to toast your father. Frank built this family with love and integrity. His legacy isn't this house or any material possession. It's the values he tried to instill in all of us: honesty, loyalty, forgiveness. To Dad, Rebecca said, raising her glass. Michael hesitated, then lifted his water glass. To Dad, and to making amends. As we ate dinner, Jason chatted excitedly about his baseball team making the playoffs. Tyler showed me a drawing he'd made in art class. Normal family moments that had seemed impossible just weeks before. After dinner, while the others cleared the table, I slipped into Frank's study, now my study too. I opened the bottom drawer of his desk and removed the envelope I'd discovered the previous week while reorganizing. Inside was a letter from Frank, dated just 2 weeks before his death. My dearest Martha, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm so sorry for that. There are things I should have told you, conversations we should have had about our finances. I've been worried about Michael for some time, his spending habits, his secrecy. I've tried to protect our assets, setting up separate accounts in your name only, accounts he can't access. I intended to update our will this month to ensure you're protected, but if something happens before I do, know this. Everything we built was meant for you first, to secure your comfort and independence. The children inherit only after your needs are fully met. That was always our understanding, and it remains my deepest wish. I love you more than these words can express. You were the best decision I ever made. Always yours. Frank tears blurred my vision as I carefully folded the letter. Frank had known something was wrong. He'd tried to protect me. And in the end, I'd found the strength to protect myself and our family legacy. A knock at the door drew my attention. Michael stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. Mom, can we talk? There's something I need to say. I tucked Frank's letter into my pocket and nodded. Come in, son. He sat across from me, hands clasped tightly. I've been doing a lot of thinking in therapy about why I did what I did. He took a deep breath. It wasn't just about the money. I was angry at Dad for years, for always being so perfect, so respected, for setting a bar I could never reach. I stayed silent, letting him continue. When he died, something in me broke. I convinced myself that taking control of everything, proving I could manage the family better than he did, would somehow make me feel, I don't know, validated. He looked up, eyes damp. It was never really about you, Mom, and I'm so sorry you got caught in the middle of my mess. It wasn't a complete explanation or excuse for his actions, but it was a start, an honest acknowledgement of the deeper issues that money alone couldn't solve. Thank you for telling me, I said softly. We have a long road ahead, Michael. Rebuilding trust takes time. I know. I don't expect forgiveness right away, but I want to earn it back, from you and the boys. He paused. And I want to understand Dad better, the man he really was, not the competitor I created in my head. I touched the letter in my pocket. I think I can help with that, when you're ready. As we walked back to join the others, I felt Frank's presence beside me. Not as a ghost or supernatural force, but as the foundation of the values that would guide our family forward. His legacy wasn't stolen after all. It was right here, in this imperfect but healing family, in this home filled with memories and, in the wisdom I'd found through fighting for what mattered most. The house would remain standing, and so would we.